if you get in with the right library or the right agent and you're on the front burner, then things can really happen for you. But if you're not in that slim minority of people there, you're better off finding a way to connect directly with the people who make it happen every day.
Well, thanks so much for joining the program today. Today, our guest is Chris SD, a good friend of mine who I've met from attending some masterminds. Chris is sitting on his sailboat, on his catamaran, right, Chris, with the Sea of Cortez back behind you as we're talking. But for those who aren't familiar with Chris, he's won multiple awards. You've helped I want to say thousands. You've probably helped over 1,000 musicians now. At least hundreds of them to get their music placed in TV and film. I've personally gone through Chris's program, The Art of the Song Pitch, and it was fantastic. I think, Chris, if I'm going to, this isn't your normal bio, but if I'm giving you a compliment, I think you're one of the people that when you do one of your courses, you really do care about helping the people be successful through your program. I was very much impressed as I went through there, but I think the other thing that impressed me is you get more excited about people placing their music on a CBS, ABC, Hulu, Netflix, whatever these places, than maybe even if you had been doing it on your own. I think that's been fun to see your reaction when we were going through the course. So anyway, Chris is here today to share some of his knowledge and experience with helping people place their music in TV and film. And he's just an all-around good guy. So Chris, there's the most unique bio you've probably ever had of yourself. Did I miss anything?
Thanks so much, Jason. That's very kind of you. I'm going to hire you as my agent. That was fantastic. Yeah, well, to start at the beginning of the bio, yes, I live on a sailboat with my wife and my 8-year-old daughter, and we cruise around. We have Starlink, so we're allowed to do everything from the satellites nowadays, which is fantastic. So this has been a real game changer for us. As you know, you can do so many things remotely. So I'm of course in Los Angeles. I have a lot of music supervisor contacts and friends of mine who are in the TV and film industry. So I'm back and forth to Los Angeles, but in between times we can do it from here. So it's been a real great thing.
Well, and you're even running a recording studio from your sailboat a little bit. I mean, you're back and forth a little bit, but you're doing recording for people as well, right?
Yeah. We have a recording studio called Sundown Session Studio, and basically it's fully remote. And our whole my whole deal was to try to provide people with world-class recordings for an indie budget. And so going back, I was a music producer for a long time, and I was fortunate enough to win some awards, and came down to Los Angeles from Canada, set up an online music studio. I didn't want to be in studios 12 to 14-hour days anymore once my daughter came along, and started recording people online and refined it. And we've been it's been great getting people into getting them publishing deals, label deals, radio play, TV and film syncs, obviously, winning international song contests. So it's been a real great ride.
Well, so let's rewind back, and I'm not even sure I know this story really. So you came from Canada, and you're this successful music producer, and now you're teaching people how to do that with getting their stuff in film. But growing up, did you think, man, I want to be in music? Or I mean, where was the origins of that music career? How did that start for you?
That's a great question. I guess the first sort of story that I could relate to music was when I didn't remember this. I was too young, but my dad told me a story of when I was maybe 2 or something. I guess they bought a little horn for me, and he said I put it in my mouth and I was trying to make a sound, and nothing happened. As soon as it made a sound, he said this look of wonder came across my face. And growing up, I grew up with a lot of the music my parents listened to, everything from the Beatles to Montoya to Tchaikovsky to a bunch of different stuff. And I used to come home from high school and sort of put a record on and put the Pioneer speakers facing inwards, and I'd lay down on the carpet and just make myself these little headphones out of speakers and just sort of listen to music. And eventually one thing led to another, where I had to throw the band together because it was fun and it was cool to be in a band, and it's like, hey, why not do it? And so we did that, and then got a lot more serious about it. And my brother and I decided to form a band, and this is in the 90s, and we essentially started to tour around, didn't know what the heck we were doing. I remember walking into one gig and seeing people with amps on stage. We literally just started playing, and they had microphones on the amplifiers, like SM57s or something. And I remember joking with my brother, like, why are they sticking a microphone on the amp? Like, why aren't they just going straight in with the guitar, which is, what? And if you don't know this, like, it's like 101 live performing. So we were really, really babes in the woods at that point. Fast forward, we managed to convince someone in Ottawa, Canada, who was managing another Ottawa band that was doing really well. All of a sudden, we thought, man, maybe it has something to do with this guy. So we convinced him to manage us. And so he managed us, and we got quite a bit of regional response. We started going to the States more, had some label interest down there. And he even got Amit Erdogan out to one of our gigs, which he's the founder of Atlanta Records. And he signed everyone from Led Zeppelin to, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young and all this stuff. And so anyway, right around that point, my brother and I, artistically, amicable separation, but my brother and I decided we were taking two different paths. I tended to be a little artier, and he tended to be poppier. And so we sort of parted ways there. But one thing that always fascinated me was what's this black magic? What's this art in the studio? How do they get these sounds to sound the way they do on recordings? It always really amazed me. And working on the other side of the glass as a musician, I was always looking in to see what the engineers and the producers were doing. And I decided I wanted to learn how to do that. So I bought myself a little Pro Tools LE system when they first came out, and started playing around with that and recording my Friends for Beer and learning. I'd already learned a lot from some of the bigger producers that we had worked with as a band, and slowly, started building up and getting better and better at what we did. Fast forward again, we ended up in Toronto. I got a job at a much bigger studio that had old analog gear, like a Neve board and like a bunch of Neumann mic, like really expensive U47s, U67s, C12s, all that stuff. And recorded bigger people. Blue Rodeo was a big band there. Chris Christopherson, worked with him, assisted on a Feist record, and just a bunch of bigger names that I had in the past, and won some Juno Awards for the records that I helped produce. And then my wife and I decided that, we just wanted something different. And Los Angeles had presented itself, and there was an opportunity to go down there and work and get a green card to do it. So we up and moved, loaded up our 69 VW van, and off we went to LA, settled in West Hollywood. And I thought, well, I'm going to come down to West Hollywood, and I'm just going to walk in there, and I've got these awards in my back pocket. Shouldn't be too hard. Well, not thinking that that's pretty much what everyone else in the world is thinking who's done reasonably well. They're coming to LA to do some interesting things.
You got humbled really fast when you came down, right?
Yeah, exactly. And which is great, because the ceiling was certainly higher and it was something to work towards. But right around then, we got pregnant with our daughter. And so at that point, I realized I didn't want to be spending those 12 to 14-hour days in the studio. Wanted to, figure out a way of making music and satisfying my soul of helping musicians make records. But how was I going to do that? And started an online studio. And then as I did that, one of the things that popped up from the online studio was, what are some of the things that people want to do with this? And a big one was get their music into TV and film. And I thought, this is something that I had been doing back in Canada, had just started getting in there, as I was helping indie musicians sort of get their music exposed, TV and film, music supervisors and so on. So I started into that, and figuring like, this will be, an interesting thing. I should be able to use my industry cred, and, the same, maybe a little bit of smugness there, thinking, oh, this shouldn't be too difficult. Well, I started reaching out to people, and, in the TV and film industry, and it was crickets. It was no one was, answering. No one was talking to me about how things should be done or what I should be doing. And I just wasn't getting any response for the musicians I was helping. And my big motivation for doing that was the fact that I wanted to be able to, get a record that we really worked hard on and make that into something that was much more viable, because a lot of the professionals that would come in, label people. They had labels, managers, agents, all pushing their career along. And the indie artists who had songs that were just as good, they just simply couldn't get the traction. And I realized sync licensing was one of the biggest things for that. You get a massive sync fee up front, so you can keep recording. You get a huge exposure because you're riding on the coattails of all the publicity that the show or movie or ad has gotten. So you're essentially, launching into this beautiful pre-made stage almost for yourself, where you're just up in front of all these thousands or millions of eyes and earballs, and you get this instant bump in a fan base. And then you make the relationships in the industry, because you start getting sync placements, labels come knocking, publishers come knocking, and so it's this big deal about how to make that happen. So in Canada, started gradually working to put that together, and started helping successfully artists, get into TV and film. And then moving to LA, it was just like pouring gas on the fire. I mean, Los Angeles is the center of, media for the world almost, and got to know more and more music supervisors. And music supervisors are the people who actually put music into TV and film. They're the ones who pick it for the directors and the producers. So
I think, as I'm thinking of my path, and probably most people as independent musicians, you come up with this music and you feel like you're on this edge of this cliff. And it's kind of like you think there's no way I can get over to the cool people or the music supervisors or whoever it is that places the stuff in there, because I don't have the label. And I think it's been interesting. It's kind of changed a little bit with how accessible maybe they are if you know what you're doing to get your foot in the door with these people, right? I mean, and that's kind of where you kind of figured that process out a little bit then.
Yeah, so really what it came down to is that there were the two main ways that people were trying to get music into TV and film, and honestly was one of the ways that I started looking at initially, was through music libraries or sync agents. So music libraries is essentially these big collections, catalogs of songs that people can upload their music to, and then music supervisors or anybody else who wants to use music can come there and select the music to be used in their show, movie, or ad. So that sounds great, right? And sync agents are the same thing, except they're a little bit more personal, as you'll sign with a sync agent. So that sounds fantastic, right? You're like, well, they have the connection with the music supervisors, so why don't I just do that? The problem is that you're in with all of these other musicians and songs. You're a needle in a haystack. So think about it a little bit like you're like a can of soup on a shelf in a superstore, a big box store. Music supervisor comes to shop for a song, okay? And they go into the box store and they start going around the box store, and it depends what department they're on. They have to be literally in your department, in your aisle, on your shelf, and then in the spot where you are to pick you out, even from the other cans of soup that are there. And so the thing is that every time a music supervisor goes to a music library, or the box store in this case, they walk out with something. So they're happy. They love the box store. So they say, we love libraries. We love agents. I always get what I need, right? The agency's happy. The libraries are happy because they always get the sync. It may not be your song, but they're always selling something to the supervisor. As an artist, you're the third wheel on this one. And you're kind of like in the spot where you're like, well, so are they going to pick me, right? So I quickly discovered that. And I realized, well, just like in life with a lot of things, sometimes it comes down to who you know. But you can't just say, I know somebody, therefore I'm going to have success. You have to walk the talk. You have to deserve the relationship. You have to do all of the things to earn their trust and to be on the same level they are. Then that's when knowing them really helps. That's when it really has an effect. And I just saw that and thought, why can't we be going directly to the gatekeepers? Like if these music supervisors are people and they go in and they go to libraries and agencies, how can I get them to come to me? And as I got to know more music supervisors and talk to them, I was like, do you guys ever use more sources, for your music? And they're like, well, of course. In fact, libraries and agencies generally are like the second thing I go to. I typically go to, labels I love, other artists that I'm friends with, or people that I'm doing. I have some friends in a band and I'll go check with them. They have all these different sources. And I thought, I need to be that source. So I started to earn that relationship. So it was just about knowing them. That's not going to get you anywhere unless you earn their trust. I was able to bring them music from indie artists, that was good, that we had worked on and that we had put together. It didn't have to be the latest, Adele record. It just had to be good, didn't have to be great, but brought that music to them. And gradually they started saying, Chris, you have this you're a great source for music. And that's how that started. So I started the Art of the Song pitch to draw in indie songwriters into my world to say, this is something that I can do for you, to help you move the needle forward in a massive way in your music career by getting it in front of these music supervisors. So that's really the genesis of how, I built the Art of the Song pitch, and why, for those listening right now, connecting with the top people is definitely the way to go, and cut out the middle person, if you can, because the last thing I'll say is that the libraries and the agencies, besides you being a needle in the haystack, they're taking a big cut of anything they get for you. So, they're taking a chunk of the sync fee, and more and more now they're taking a part of the publishing. And I've even heard some contracts that are like, they're asking people to be in perpetuity, which means you're assigned to them forever for that song to pitch, which is, I say run for the hills.
Then you lose it forever, right? It's no longer.
Yeah. And most musicians that I talk to, like, I pretty much say all of them. I think I know maybe a couple out of all the musicians that I speak to are not getting sync placements in libraries and agencies. It's just because the odds are stacked against them. It's not that agencies and libraries are bad. I encourage that for certain kinds of music and certain approaches. If you get in with the right library or the right agent and you're on the front burner, then things can really happen for you. But if you're not in that slim minority of people there, you're better off finding a way to connect directly with the people who make it happen every day.
And you call it, I love that you call it the art of the song pitch. And as I went through your course, there's definitely, as you give examples, and I know you brought several music supervisors on that you'd interview and they just share their experience with people, but there's certainly an art and a way to reach out to these people and a way to not. I mean, there's ways to, I don't want to call it being blackballed or just, but there's some ways that you could definitely turn people off if you go about it that way. And I think that's a danger to the independent musician that doesn't know what they're doing or hasn't learned the hard way or gone through courses like yours. That, there's better ways to do it than others, correct?
Well, absolutely. So on the that's a great question, Jason. The thing is, it's often at the beginning when you're first starting out, it's a little bit less about what you should do and much more about what you should not do, right? So there are things, for example, if you don't know how to have your music cleared, which means that you haven't got it figured out so that the supervisor says, well, this music has been checked out, all the T's have been crossed, the I's have been dotted, whatever, you've done all your due diligence. I know that if I take this song in, there's going to be no surprises. Some other writer is not going to come out of the woodwork and sue me, or something weird's going to happen. That's a big advantage for libraries and agencies, is they vet all that stuff for the supervisor. So everything within the library of the agency has been already checked out, so that they've earned their trust. For an indie songwriter, it's very difficult because you're just one person in a basket of apples, and unfortunately the supervisors have run into a few bad apples and it ruins it for everybody. So they, as soon as they hear you're an independent musician on your own and you're reaching out with music, they're a little like, yeah, I don't know. It's something that can be a difficult thing to overcome. But once you're past that, once you learn the things that you shouldn't be doing, then you focus on the things that you should be doing. And then to proactively get your music in front of them, or what your music needs to have, like how to target your music to specific opportunities, giving them what they want when they're looking for it. That's huge, right? Being able to actually reach them. Like, how do you actually reach them? And one of the biggest ways to reach a music supervisor, and this goes for actually anybody in life that is, an A player, is being able to talk to them like a pro. And that doesn't mean, you have to use upper English or like anything, like fancy writing or like anything like that. It simply means that they've got to feel that you understand what they understand. You're speaking their lingo. You know enough to not be dangerous to them, right? It's the one people that don't know enough that are the dangerous. We were just talking about whitewater rafting, right? It's the danger isn't the people who are generally going to be so gung-ho, they're going to do something crazy. It's generally the beginners that don't know what to do, And so this is something that's really important to remember in sync licensing, is you want to know how to do that. And in the art of the song pitch is I teach them all of the things that they need to understand to not only get their music into TV and film successfully, but to be able to talk to anybody in the industry like a professional. And then, of course, the icing on the cake is I put them actually in front of music supervisors. So I connect them to music supervisors so they can get their foot in the door, so that the supervisor hears their song, they meet them face to face, and they can go through that process, which is really the if you've got the other two things in place, that's the icing on the cake.
Right. No, I think what's interesting is, in looking back, having gone through your courses, it's not that it's really difficult. It's just knowing those handful of things to do, like metadata is a big one that seems so simple, but, just not having that as like an immediate flag. It's like, yeah, they don't know what they're doing. Or maybe if you have your song without the metadata on it, then you may as well have not even sent the song, because they won't even be able to find you. Things like tools like TrackStage that I know some of our friends Scott and Robina are working on to make that easier. I love that there's some of these tools that if you just knew about it, it would have taken an extra 3 minutes when you were in the studio to add that metadata. And now when you send it out, it's worthwhile. And I think the other interesting thing is that I really enjoyed going through your course is the fact that you did bring on several music supervisors. So it wasn't just Chris's way and what Chris thought. It was, hey, I'm talking to this person and they're working on this project that's coming up for HBO or Netflix or what, and you really get to know, you start thinking more like a music supervisor, so that you're more helpful to them if you're going to reach out to them. And then I thought it was interesting how towards the end of your course, what happened is you would actually have you'd pick your song that would be pitched to this person, that music supervisor who you thought you might be able to help. And it wasn't that they were going to come sync 10 people's songs all at once, but you were able to hear feedback like a fly on the wall, not just with the one-on-one, but now you're listening and you're like, oh, well, they said this was good, but maybe not this. And all of a sudden you're learning a lot more than the normal. If you were to get that little 5-minute phone call with a supervisor to get feedback just for you, I just got to sit through 12 and learn, or, I think there were several dozen that I did go through, and then you can go back and even watch more if you wanted to see the recordings of others. So I think the course you put together is very unique and very interesting if somebody's really wanting to learn it. But what I'd also say is it's not just you're going to get a song placement. I still have not gotten a song placement, but I'll be honest. I'll also be honest with you. I have not been as diligent as I know I should have been. But it's not your fault or the course's fault. It's one of those where now I know. So as I do these projects, I could be successful with it if I just did take the time. Do you find a lot of times, when the whole podcast is called Successful Musicians, what do you feel like is the thing that keeps people from being successful in the TV sync world and movie world as you're coaching?
I would say, yeah, that's a great question. I would say 3 things. The first is the production level is not where it needs to be. So that and I don't just mean the quality of the recording either. I mean that the production is not catered to the targets that they're hoping to get their music into, where they'll think like, oh, I've got this track and I've made it the way I want to make it. And this style of music gets into the show. Why aren't they picking the music? I will come back to them sometimes and say, well, go to tunefind.com, for example, look at other people who've gotten into that show that's like your music, go grab those tracks and put them in a playlist together with yours. Now, why is there such a big difference between yours and what are you missing, right, with those? And you can see literally like, oh, well, gosh, they've got this going on and I don't, and they've got this going on and I don't. And, so there's the production level also has to be good. Doesn't have to be perfect, but just has to be above of a certain threshold. The second one is targeting. So you have to be targeting your music to the right people. And not only the right people, but of course the right opportunities. And you need to basically give them the thing that they're actually looking for in their mind, what they're trying to put in the show. And you do that by finding out what music they are placing into that show. So by targeting very accurately and knowing the exact kind of music that they're looking for, that is a huge one too. Another part of that is also like making sure that you understand that some avenues work really well for certain kinds of music and other avenues don't. For example, production libraries or something like that. Those are great for instrumentals, right? Or things like that. And that's kind of generally a place that they'll go, and if they don't have a composer on a show, which often they have composers for montages, instrumental montages, if they're just after an instrumental part for something, they're going to go more into production libraries more typically, because there generally is less of a brand associated with the music if they're not an artist, like a touring artist with a website, and they're doing that. So it's understanding that. And then the last thing is follow up and being you don't have to be persistent, but you have to be regular. You just have to be there and building it. Go to some events, keep sending music, just keep a system to keep getting your music out there and getting it in front of the right people. And the way to do that successfully is not by cold calling. You're not going to, you can go online and you can read all about what to do. And that's exactly what I did at the beginning, but it's so much of it is relationship dependent. So you really want to go through an avenue that is going to get you that foot in the door, get that first few contacts available so that you can say, hey, I met you, or you listen to my music, even if they don't remember, because they listen to all music all the time.
Right.
If it'd be like you met somebody at a party, and you forgot about them and they reached out to you and said, hey, Jason, it's so-and-so. You don't even remember their name. And I talked to you and we talked about this at the party. And you're like, oh yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, I remember you. And then your response changes immediately because you already had a conversation with them. You don't remember all the details of who they were, but you do remember having that conversation, what it was about, and you remember their face and you remember having a nice conversation with them. Changes everything. And that's a big part of success in TV and film, is building that trust, building those relationships over time. And that's a big, huge part of what I do, is to connect musicians. And I also, for graduates of the Art of the Song Pitch, I have a coaching program, which has even more integration with that. And it really, really goes deeply into developing relationships in the industry. So that has been the number one most successful part of it. As long as you have all your ducks in a row with everything else I just mentioned, that's absolutely the top, the winner there for sure.
Well, I think as I'm hearing, gosh, you need to consistently follow up and stay in front of them every once in a while, as much as you'd want to automate that. So you could just say, okay, send every 30 days, send them an email. The reality is, like you said, it's a relationship that just wouldn't work. And if you come out saying, hey, here's my song that I did, and it's completely off base. I mean, I'm a piano guy that I do lots of piano stuff. And if I'm, pitching to somebody who's working on a heavy metal type project, I'm just going to look stupid. And so I think it's one of those where for those, at least that I've seen, that really want to get into this world, you do have to do your research and know the person a little bit about what projects they're working on, so that you come across differently than maybe that automated person that, it's going to be really easy to pick out, did that person know who I am, or did they really do some research before they sent this email to me? If they even look at your email. So
yes, exactly. And that is so critical. Getting them to look at your emails based on the relationship that you can get. But you're absolutely right. People want to know you've done your homework. They want to know that if you have obviously targeted your music properly, they're going to feel like you have entered the conversation in their mind. You've really kind of you're offering something that is exactly what they're looking for. And then you become a dependable source. You've got the relationship already, even if it's the very beginnings of one. And then you've got the credibility of your ability to target and have good produced music. You've got all three of those things going for you. And that is where the success starts to happen. So the second thing I will say, you know, everybody who goes through the art of the song pitch, I get this question sometimes, you know, like, will it work for me? You know, am I guaranteed a sync placement? And I'm like, well, first off, it can absolutely work for you because of, you can see all the, you know, I've got tons of case studies that I have when we open up our course. And the idea, am I guaranteed a sync placement? It's like, you know, sync licensing is not unlike everything else in life. You know, there's no guarantee for anything that I'm aware of. If you know, please tell me. But I don't know pretty much anything that you're guaranteed to get in life without some hard work, some little bit of luck, being in the right place at the right time, and being focused on what you're going after, so that even if you fail, I don't call it failure, I just call it a temporary delay, to get what you want, because anybody can get there if they want it and they work hard at it and are consistent about it. So that's really a huge part of the success. And those artists get sync after sync after sync after sync, you know, and it's a great thing because they're getting all this big sync fee up front, all the back end royalties, and they get to keep doing what they love to do. When
you talked about production level, like, I think in, you know, for the newer musician or the person saying, well, is my music good enough? I'm curious what advice you have for those people that are kind of on that fence, and what resources maybe are available. As I'm thinking through some of the resources that I know of, I mean, just your friends and family, it's great to get feedback from them, but they're going to be nice to you sometimes. And that's a danger, I think. I think, you know, there's definitely some Facebook groups. And I think, I mean, I know you provide a group where people can interact and give feedback, which is great. Bobby Owsinski is another one that just came to mind. I mean, that guy has been around for a long time and written the textbooks that are used in college. But I believe he even has some feedback that he'll provide. For anybody who's not familiar with Bobby, go look him up. Bobby Owsinski, OW. I mean, we'll put a link in the show notes, but fantastic resource if you're wanting to do production and really get into the nuts and bolts of it, right? And I mean, absolutely. What other resources would you suggest for people that, you know, that independent musicians that's thinking, am I good enough to do this? What do you tell them?
Here's that's Jason, you're an excellent interviewer. I keep saying great question, because I really mean it. These are all excellent questions. And so basically, the thing that I tell people first off is that what you just talked about is vet your music. And that's something we do in the Art of the Song pitch, is we put people in a vetting group, and then people basically can comment on each other's songs. And I tell them how to put a group together outside of the Art of the Song pitch and why it's the most valuable thing, because you don't know, you know, you can't know yourself about everything. Well, to put it a different way, you know how someone comes to you with the problem and you can solve their problem so easily, and yet your own are so difficult. It's the same kind of thing. It's the same thing with music. So there's that. And then the second thing I say, which is, I don't have very specific resources, though Bobby is an absolute excellent one. The second one is more of a concept. It's more of an idea, is that while you're learning how to produce your music, if you're trying to do it at home, in the meantime, hire someone who's better than you to learn from and do your music while you're learning. Because the bottom line is that there's no sense in wasting great songs that you've written on mediocre production. Because once you record them and they're not ideal, they're not there. That's why sometimes you hear an original song that was okay, and then somebody covers it in the production and everything's much better, and it's a massive hit, right? That's the difference. It's the same song. It's just maybe a different vocalist, but that's really part of the production too. So the production has such a huge part of the success of a song. So the argument, you might be saying, you know, Chris, that's great, but I don't have the money to be hiring people out and running my home studio, whatever. If you think about $1,000 to put together a home studio, right? And I'm including your microphones and your cables and your computer and your interface and your speakers and, you know, a little sound treatment, all of that stuff. And you say, well, I've spent that money. Now I could just go do it for free now, right? So why wouldn't I just do that? Well, the problem is that time is money and money is time. So all of that time that you're spending in the studio working on your your music that's probably going to take you 5 to 10 times longer to get to where you want it to be than a pro would. That's time that you're not spending with your friends, your family. It's time you're not working and making extra money. It's time you're paying a price for that time. Now, if you love doing what you do, and that's exactly the way I started, right? I did exactly what I'm just saying not to do, is I started just recording, and it took me a long time to get to a point where I was pro enough where I could actually say, I can be a musician or a producer or an engineer for a living. And I had the advantage of having worked with big producers when I was in my band, and it still took me a long time. So, don't be afraid to hire people out that are better than you. That's Steve Jobs' whole mantra when he started Apple. He said his biggest thing that he figured out was to hire people that are the best that you can possibly get and that are better than you, and let them do their thing and let them kind of self-manage their stuff. Your job as the leader is to reiterate the mission statement, to reiterate the vision. And if you're a chef in a kitchen, and you're a famous Michelin star chef, you can have a bunch of sous chefs in your kitchen making everything. You don't need to make the sauce. You don't need to make the soup. Let them make it. You're the one who came up with the recipe, though. You're the one who tastes it and tells them how to change it. You're doing a lot less work, but you're having all of these other people who there may be a better sauce maker than you because you haven't made a sauce in 10 years, because you've been a great chef for 10 years. So use that. Nowadays is such a golden time for that. It's so cheap. You don't have to work at my studio. You don't have to work with me. There's lots of other people out there who also are producers, and find someone within your budget who you can work with, who are really good, and let them make their magic with your music. And then that's when things start to happen. When you've got that one out of three things that I talked about figured out, right? The production, the targeting, and then the relationships. So make sure that you've got that production down, and don't be afraid to spend a little bit of money on your music while you're learning how to become a better producer.
Well, I think your comments are, that's such good advice. So I've got a new recording studio that's within steps of where my office is. I've got $100,000 piano to play on, and I could go out there all the time and record myself, and I know how to do it. But what's been interesting is, even though I've got access to way more than what any normal person would have, I'm still bringing in the audio engineer who's going to push the buttons for me. And it's interesting. Once you've done it for a long time, I recognize the value those people bring in. And as much as I want to maybe save the money, I'm like, oh, I can go do it for free. In 2 hours, I can probably get what I'd get done by myself done in 10 hours. And I think that advice is so wise for, anybody who's just doing independent musician stuff. Yes, you need to learn how to do it on your own, but recognizing that working with other people is going to provide another taste tester and just make your music all the better. If you'll be willing to learn and take criticism and be open-minded, I see that as some new musicians kind of think, well, it has to be this way. And the sooner you recognize, wow, if I get more smart people in the room, my music's going to get to that next level. And a lot of it is a journey probably to get there, right? I'm sure as you look back, as your experience was, the more time you were around other musicians and could hear different things, you got better as you went, correct?
Well, yeah, but there's a huge difference. One was, running alongside the railroad tracks, as you're trying to get to where you're going, and then figuring that out and jumping on a train. Because when you're around great minds, when you're around really smart people and who are, really experienced, most smarts, if we're honest, comes from experience. It just, people are talented for sure, but they all have put in a lot of time and work. There's very few people. I don't think there's probably anybody who's just born brilliant and awesome and is just amazing. They have to work at it. They have to do it, So when you're around people like that, it's an exponential growth. So the time that it takes is much, much shorter because it all rubs off on you. There's that old saying, like, your fate in life is really the sum of the 5 people you hang out with most. And it's so true. If you're hanging out with the most successful people in something, that is going to rub off on you so quickly. You're going to learn so fast, and not just the stuff. You're going to learn the vibe, the way to think, the way to be, because so much about recording and engineering and making music isn't in the technique. It's in the It's in the feeling and watching how they do what they do. Their expectations. That's another huge one. You know, what they expect to hear back from the speakers. I remember going in when I thought I was pretty good, you know, in my home studio, and I'd worked on a couple of records that were doing well. And I went into a pro studio with like a real pro producer, just miking drums up. And the drum sound that he got was like, I was like, wow, that is amazing. And he still wasn't happy. And he went out, moved some mics around. And then the drum was like, wow, it's even more amazing. He still wasn't happy. And he went out and he moved more stuff around. He came in, and then it was just like, oh my gosh, like, he is light years beyond me. But just by being in the room with him, watching what he did, seeing that expectation of what he thought should sound like, I started expecting the same thing from my drums. And that expectation was like breaking the glass ceiling. It was like really like, I shouldn't be, I was settling for here, and I really need to hear this, you know, and I never thought that way. So.
Well, I know we're about out of time, but I got two more questions for you. So one, if you could rewind back the clock and somehow 20 years, or, you know, the teenager, you know, early college age kid that was just starting out, if you had this elevator amount of time to kind of give yourself some advice, what would be that short little word of advice you would maybe give to yourself thinking back, if you had that moment to talk to yourself?
Well, you either used a little bit of ESP there or something. It's literally what we were just talking about. If I could rewind 20 years and I was like thinking, looking out at, you know, starting this whole thing up and doing it, I would have worked with mentors or people who are better than me much sooner. I would have tried to surround myself with people who are in the know. You know, the only reason that the Art of the Song pitch is as successful as it is, the only reason that the artists that I work with get as many syncs as they do isn't, you even alluded a little to it, it's not because of me. You know, I put it all together. All of it came from the music supervisors. And then I threw in my experience from, you know, the side of the fence from the musician side. So I understand it from a musician side or as a producer side, but I got all of the knowledge, all of the ways to do it. I literally just ask them. I'm like, you know, once you're friends, they tell you the real deal. They're like, you know, like, what songs are you going to pick? Why are you going to pick them? How are you going to do this? They tell you that. And, you know, so that's what I would do is I would work on trying to get around as high players as I possibly could within what I was trying to do. And I would say that applies to anything in life. Don't try to just do it on your own. Don't just try to do it by reading on the internet or in books. Try to get to know real people doing the real work if you can.
Great advice. And it's the last question for you, and it kind of revolves a little bit around the same thing, but as you look back in your life, what's the best advice you've been given by somebody as you look back and you're like, man, that was so impactful? Best advice somebody maybe gave you?
I have had, I would say quite a bit of it. If I was to just pick one and make it relevant to kind of what we're talking about, something happened to me when we first started, my brother and I first started our band, is we basically went to a conference, and Malcolm McLaren, who was the manager of the Sex Pistols, was the keynote speaker. And my brother and I came in a little bit late, and we were coming in down the hallway, and we wanted to see his talk, but we just missed it. And he was coming out, and he was walking down the hallway towards us with his entourage. And we got to us, and I jumped in front of him and I said, Malcolm, I just have one quick question for you. We're a brand new band starting out. Do you have any advice for a band starting out? You know? And then he looked at my brother and I can't remember if it was my brother or I, grabbed the tag, you know, the conference tag off our neck, picked it up, threw it on the floor. And he said, don't come to them, go home, write great songs, and make them come to you. And I was like, right, you know? And so the lesson there I think for everybody is that even though I'm saying go work with people that are greater than you, even though you want to interface and become friends and have relationships, figure out who you are, figure out what your voice is, carry yourself the way you're meant to carry yourself through life. Because, you know, that whole thing that they talk about when you're a kid, like everyone's special and everyone has their own thing, you know, sometimes I thought, yeah, that's just to appease the people who are, you know, not going to be successful. Maybe I won't be successful and they're just trying to make me feel good. You know, it's what I was thinking is not true. What they're saying is very true, is that we're each a fingerprint. We each have our own thing, right? And that one thing is the thing that's going to be interesting to everybody. And so you need to figure that out and refine that and get good. If you're speaking in musical terms, Bob Dylan, I mean, I don't know anyone who would agree that he's a good singer. I mean, he's a great singer when it comes down to the art, but as a technical singer, he's about as far as you can get from that, right? But he became Bob Dylan, right? And then on the other side, you've got Adele, right? Who writes her own music, has one of the most beautiful voices that has ever in existence. And she just followed that path. Without great songs, she would be nobody. But she figured out how to be great musician and deliver in the way that she feels and who she is as a person with a great voice and practice. So figure out your thing, go with it, surround yourself by people who can help enhance that. And I think that is a real good recipe for success. And that's one thing I've tried to do in singer-songwriter is when people bring them into the world, help them with their writing, their production, all through the art of the song pitch, their vetting, their targeting, how to get through to people, and then taking that and putting them in front of the people who actually make things happen. And so I've tried to follow my own advice there, and it's working out great so far.
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for we've taken way more time than I was expecting. You've shared some awesome knowledge. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people. For those that want to check you out or kind of learn more about what you're doing, I believe it's artofthesongpitch.com. Is that where they go to learn more?
Well, we actually only launch that class once a year. And
okay.
So if you're just, if we're not open right now, just syncsongwriter.com. That's SYNC, sync. Songwriter.com, and you can go there. I've got lots of blogs. I put one out every week full of tips and tricks and talk about some of the things we've talked about here and stuff like that, completely free. So you could just go over there and check that out if you feel like it.
One of these days, we're going to have to convince you to start doing a podcast, because I think it would be a lot of great information. But for anybody who is curious about, is it worth signing up for this? I mean, it's once a year that you're doing it. It's definitely a game changer for knowing what to do, and then it really is in your hands of whether you do it or not. And that's how it is with anything in music, though. Is are you going to get down and get dirty and do the work? So, thanks so much for your time today, Chris.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jason.